A mother clutches her infant, hearing rustles in the grass. She doesn't know if it's the wind, or something hunting her. The night is heavy, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and ash from a dying fire. Around her, the darkness presses close, swallowing the edges of the world. The moon is thin tonight, too faint to pierce the tall grass that sways in slow, deliberate arcs. Every shadow feels alive. Every breath feels stolen. She holds the child tighter, feeling his tiny heartbeat thrum against her ribs. His warmth seeps into her skin, a fragile heat that could vanish in an instant. He stirs, a soft whimper escaping his lips, and she presses her hand gently over his mouth, not to silence him, but to muffle the sound from whatever waits out there. The rustling comes again, closer this time, accompanied by a low creak of bending stems. Her body tenses, every muscle coiled, her eyes straining against the blackness. She knows what moves like that. She's heard it before. The measured steps of something that kills not from desperation, but from patience. Behind her, the others are motionless. No one dares speak. No one dares breathe too loudly. A circle of figures in the dark, each clutching what they can, a sharpened stone, a broken branch, a memory of survival passed down from those who faced the same danger 1,000 nights before. Somewhere in the grass, a predator waits. Its hunger is a silent clock, counting down the seconds between life and death. It smells the child. It smells the fear. And it knows that here, the smallest sound could betray them all. The mother's mind races. There are no walls to hide behind. No steel to swing, no fire to light the edges of the dark. There is only instinct, raw, ancient, and desperate. In this world, every moment is a negotiation with death. One mistake, one falter, and the bloodline ends here. How did they endure it? How did earlier humans, before the comfort of cities, before the promise of safety, protect their young in a land ruled by teeth, claws, and hunger? The answer is older than memory. It is written in the bones we've left buried in the earth, and in the instincts that still live in us today. The story begins here, in the dark, with a heartbeat in her arms and something moving in the grass. 1,000,000 years is not a blink. It is a stretch of time so vast that the world itself reshapes between heartbeats, mountains rising and crumbling, rivers carving new veins across the earth, climates shifting from suffocating heat to bone-cracking cold. The mother's world is not the one you know. It is the early Pleistocene, somewhere between 2,000,000 and 500,000 years before your birth. The land is a patchwork of open savannas and thick, tangled forests, stitched together by rivers that flood without warning and dry to dust without mercy. The air hums with the low growl of predators that have ruled far longer than any human has walked here. This is the realm of the earlier humans, Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and their kin. They are not yet masters of their environment. They are learning, painfully, that survival demands more than strength. Their tools are crude, their shelters temporary, their lives fragile. They carry the intelligence that will one day change the world, but here, that spark is small, flickering in the wind. They move in small bands, their lives dictated by the shifting seasons. The wet months swell the rivers, drawing herds of prey animals, and with them, the predators that stalk in their shadow. The dry months shrink water to dangerous pools where thirst drives the desperate into the jaws of ambush. Every step beyond the tree line is a gamble. The open plains offer no cover from the eyes of lions, saber-toothed cats, and giant hyenas, whose patience is measured not in minutes, but in days. The forests hold their own perils, leopards that drop from branches without sound, snakes thick enough to crush the breath from a grown man. And still, they must move. For food. For water. For the safety that never lasts in one place for long. You imagine the mother in the grass is one of them. Her people have crossed miles to find a new camp, driven by dwindling game and the constant shadow of hunger. She does not know the names of the creatures that stalk her, only their patterns, their smells, the shape of their tracks pressed into mud. her knowledge is not written. It is lived, etched into the mind by fear and by the memory of those who did not return. In this time, life is a fragile bargain with the earth itself. The ground feeds you and shelters you, but it will not protect you. The sky offers light by day, but abandons you to the night. And yet, they endure. Not because they are stronger than the predators, but because they adapt. They learn. They pass on the secrets of survival not through words on paper, but through the scars on their skin, the way their eyes scan the horizon, the instinct to pull a child close at the faintest sound in the dark. Imagine if they could see you now, safe, fed, and warm, watching their story from a place they could never imagine. Imagine what they would think if you wouldn't even click a free button to honor the struggle that let you exist. Subscribe. Everything wanted you dead. The land was not simply a place to live, it was an unending battlefield where every moment of peace was borrowed time. The mother's world is surrounded by eyes, claws, and teeth. Saber-toothed cats prowl the edges of the savanna, their fangs as long as your hand, able to pierce flesh and bone with a single strike. They are not hunters of desperation, they are specialists in ending life quickly. Their patience is cold, their power absolute. Giant hyenas haunt the open plains. These are not the scavengers you know today. They are predators in their own right, with jaws strong enough to shatter the thigh bone of an elephant. They hunt in packs, moving low to the ground, their laughter carrying across the night as a warning that once you are seen, you are already prey. African hunting dogs run the grasslands in relentless formation, their endurance unmatched. They do not give up, not when the sun rises and not when your legs grow weak. They take turns leading the chase, wearing you down until your body betrays you. In the forests, the dangers change shape but not intent. Leopards move like shadows through the branches, leaping silently to strike from above. Large constrictor snakes coil in the tall grass or hang from limbs, their bodies powerful enough to crush the life from a grown adult in minutes. In the undergrowth, the rustle of leaves might be the wind, or the prelude to your final breath. Nature itself is a predator. The rains can turn a gentle river into a wall of water in minutes, sweeping away entire camps before a warning can be shouted. Volcanic eruptions bury the horizon in choking ash, the ground trembling with the roar of something older and more merciless than any living thing. When the cold descends, it is not just uncomfortable, it kills slowly, tightening its grip until the body fails. Nights can drop below freezing, and without fire or shelter, the cold becomes an invisible hunter. And yet, not all threats come from the wild. Others like you, other bands of earlier humans, can be as dangerous as any beast. The competition for hunting grounds, for water, for shelter, is fierce. To lose a fight for territory is to face hunger and exposure, and often death. Sometimes the threat comes quietly, in the dark, when another group approaches without warning, weapons in hand, seeking to take what is yours. In this world, the smallest are the most at risk. Infants cannot run. They cannot fight. A cry in the night can carry across the plains, a beacon for predators that hunt by sound. A baby's scent is sharp and unfamiliar to the animals that stalk nearby, and once they catch it, they will not stop. The bones tell these stories in silence. Fossil sites hold the remains of earlier humans, some marked with the deep grooves of teeth, punctures in skulls, scored ribs, splintered femurs. Bite marks match the patterns of saber-toothed cats, hyenas, and other predators. They do not lie. These are not imagined dangers. They are carved into the record of our species, each one a reminder that survival was never guaranteed. Every hour was a wager. Every choice, where to sleep, where to move, when to hunt, was a decision between safety and death. In this place, the mother holding her child is not paranoid. She is awake because to close her eyes too long is to lose everything. If you think you could survive it, remember. They faced these dangers without walls, without weapons without the comfort of a world built to protect you. And if you are still here because they endured, why wouldn't you honor them now? Subscribe. They did not build walls from stone. They built them from flesh, bone, and trust. The earliest humans, long before they could write their names in the dust, understood something primal: one body alone is a meal, but 20 bodies together can be a fortress. Bands of 20 to 80 souls, bound not by law but by the silent contract of survival, moved as one organism. Every step, every watchful eye, was part of a living shield. When night fell, they closed ranks. Elders, mothers, and infants huddled in the center, ringed by the strongest hunters and fighters. The edges of that circle were the first line of defense, the first to smell the musk of a stalking cat, the first to hear the soft pad of paws in the grass. Their protection wasn't always noble. Fear welded them together. If one fell behind, the others could not afford to go back. The circle closed again, tighter, as though the missing one had never been there. You can still see this ancient strategy in our cousins, the baboons that form protective crescents around their young, the chimpanzees that swarm and mob a leopard until it retreats into the trees. We were no different. Our footprint was not just in the dirt. It was in the pattern of how we stood, how we moved. Archaeologists have found traces of this in the most unassuming of places. At a fossil site in northern Kenya, a trail of prints stretches across what was once a lakeshore. The smaller prints, likely from children, are flanked on both sides by larger ones. A living corridor. You can almost see the shadows of the bodies that walked there, the invisible wall they made. It was not just about defense from predators, it was a declaration. We are not prey if we stand together. And yet, you, right now, are standing outside the circle. They stood shoulder to survive. Yet here you are, alone, quiet in the shadows, instead of stepping in with us. You could join the circle. You could stand with us. All it takes is one click. Subscribe. At night, the world did not sleep. The wind carried whispers from far-off hills, the grass bent under paws you could not see, and the darkness was not empty, it was crowded with eyes. In this ancient theater of shadows, early humans developed one of their most unyielding defenses, the night watch. It was not a choice. It was an agreement sealed by necessity, because to close your eyes too long was to invite death into the camp. They rotated sentinels, each person taking their turn to sit at the perimeter, the firelight painting their faces in amber and black. In the stillness, every flicker in the grass was interrogated by their gaze, every change in the rhythm of crickets was measured against the unspoken catalogue of danger. A twig snapping could mean nothing, or it could mean a leopard circling the edge of the firelight, calculating how long before the watchers' heads would drop in exhaustion. Warnings had to be instant. If a predator approached, the first sound to pierce the night might be the low, urgent hitch of breath sucked between teeth. A signal that made every sleeping body jolt upright. Then came the sharp, metallic clack of stone on stone, an echo that carried through the camp like a burst of alarm. Mothers and fathers would scoop infants into their arms, shielding small limbs beneath layers of bodies. Older children were herded, not with words, but with gentle, firm shoves toward the camp's core, where the light was brightest and the air thick with human scent, a natural deterrent to many predators. They learned to use sound not just to communicate with each other, but to disorient threats. A sudden, unified shout could mimic the call of a much larger force. In the dark, numbers mattered less than the illusion of strength. The night was a performance in vigilance. And every second, someone's eyes were open, tracing the line between survival and annihilation. Even today, echoes of this strategy remain in the watchful traditions of certain tribes, the barking of village dogs, the restless turning of parents whose children sleep just meters away. They lost sleep so their young could live. And yet, here you are, safe, warm, and unthreatened, hesitating to move your thumb a few centimeters to subscribe. That's cold. Fire was never merely warmth. It was a weapon, a shield, a signal to the world that humans would not yield. Around 1 million years ago, Homo erectus learned to harness this dangerous, flickering force. Sparks captured from stone, embers carried from distant burns, small flames coaxed into life with careful breaths and patient hands, each fire a promise, fragile yet defiant, against the darkness that wanted them dead. The mother's infant, once trembling in the cold night, now nestles closer to the fire's glow. The warmth seeps into fragile bones, keeping hypothermia at bay, turning shivers into stillness, fear into focus. The light pushes back shadows, shrinking the territory of predators. Every paw step that might have gone unnoticed now glints off embers, every rustle of the grass exposed for just enough time to see the danger lurking. Fire allowed them to do more than survive, it let them claim territory that would otherwise have been forbidden. Open plains, where lions and hyenas once reigned unchecked, became places they could cross, places they could hunt, gather, and raise their young with at least a fragile sense of safety. The darkness no longer belonged entirely to the hunters. They used fire to cook, transforming raw meat into food that could be eaten safely, that carried more nutrition, that strengthened the body against disease and exhaustion. Every bite taken beside a fire was a defiance of the natural order, a claim that humans could bend the world to their will, if only slightly. Archaeologists at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa have found the earliest evidence of controlled fire, buried under layers of ancient ash and stone. Charred remnants testify not just to survival, but to ingenuity, to the first human assertion that darkness could be conquered, if only in a circle of glowing light. This knowledge changed everything. It demanded cooperation, attention, and care. Someone had to maintain the flame through the night. Someone had to feed the fire, just as they fed the child, just as they watched for the predators that still prowled beyond its reach. And yet, here you are, surrounded by the comfort they could barely imagine, warmth, safety, sustenance, hesitating to honor it with a simple action. They stoked fires so that their young could live. You won't even take a second to subscribe? That is cold. The earth itself became a weapon in their grasp. Before metal, before the mastery of alloys, there were stones, shards picked from riverbeds, flakes struck from cores, edges honed by repetition and intuition. These were the first instruments of human defiance. Oldowan tools, simple but lethal in intent, appeared over 2 million years ago. Later, Acheulean hand axes emerged, symmetrical and deadly, a refinement that spoke not just of strength but of planning, foresight, and precision. A mother carrying her child no longer relied solely on vigilance or fire. She could wield stone, sharp enough to cut, to wound, to drive back the unseen terror that circled the perimeter of the camp. Wooden spears, balanced for throwing, extended human reach beyond the limits of muscle, giving them a chance to strike before being struck. The world of predators, once absolute, began to recognize humans as more than prey. Bones tell these stories in silence. At sites across Africa, animal remains bear the marks of stone tools, clean cuts across marrow, punctures from thrusting spears, scars that prove the difference between predator and hunted. They reveal the first evidence that humans were beginning to rewrite their place in the hierarchy of life. The predators that once considered them defenseless began to hesitate. A saber-tooth might pause before a shadow, a hyena might circle warily, calculating whether the cost of attack outweighed the meal. Weapons were more than instruments of survival, they were signals. Every raised spear, every sharp-edged stone in hand, communicated the unspoken truth: humans were dangerous, unpredictable, relentless. The psychological advantage was as crucial as the physical. Fear could be wielded, just as easily as a blade, shaping behavior across species. And still, it required coordination, trust, and presence of mind. One mistake, a slip in concentration, a misjudged throw, could turn the tool against the wielder. Each strike demanded precision, each defensive motion demanded the calm that only experience could teach. They were learning not only to protect themselves but to anticipate, to manipulate, to make the forest and the savanna bend subtly to their will. And you, in the comfort of a world they carved from danger, hesitate. They held sharpened stones in trembling hands to guard the smallest among them. You won't even hold the simplest tool of acknowledgement, a click to subscribe. That is cold. The body itself became a weapon. Humans did not rely solely on stones or spears, evolution had begun to shape them for something extraordinary, the ability to throw with power and precision. The shoulder, rotated and stabilized unlike any other primate, allowed overarm throws that could reach predators at distances no other ape could match. A flick of the wrist, a turn of the torso, and a projectile became an extension of intent, a shield, a warning, a strike that could alter the outcome of life or death. A mother in the dark could hurl a stone with deadly intent, keeping the predators, hyenas, saber-tooths, or stalking leopards, at bay. Distance became safety. Calculated force became survival. What the predators had once taken for granted, the vulnerability of the young, was no longer absolute. Comparisons to other primates reveal the magnitude of this advantage. Chimpanzees can throw, but their range and accuracy are laughable by human standards. The skill required to aim a stone, to account for distance, wind, and motion, gave early humans an edge that shaped evolution itself. Those who could throw with precision survived, those who could not became evidence in the fossil record of the unforgiving world outside the circle. Throwing was not just defense. It was deterrence. Predators learned to respect the humans who could strike before being struck. A well-aimed stone or spear was a language of threat, a declaration that humans would not cower, that they would fight to preserve the smallest among them. And still, it demanded focus, strength, and timing. One miscalculation could cost a life, a child, or the entire band. The ability to throw was not granted, it was honed, practiced, embedded into the very structure of their bones. And you, in your comfortable world, cannot even make a small gesture to honor that instinct, that effort, that sacrifice. They learned to throw stones at lions. You can't throw us a simple subscribe. Brutal. Survival demanded motion. Standing still was surrender. Earlier humans did not merely occupy a place, they moved through it with intention, timing, and knowledge etched into memory. They tracked the seasons as closely as they tracked the herds, knowing when rains would fill rivers and when the sun would dry them to dust. They understood predator patterns, the rhythm of breeding zones, the territories of rival groups. To remain in one place too long was to invite catastrophe. Migration was not wandering. It was a strategy, a choreography of life and death. Families and bands moved together, following the pulse of the land, tracing routes that would later be etched into stone as fossilized footprints, preserved for millennia. Each step was deliberate, measured against the twin threats of predator and rival. A herd of antelope was more than food, it was a moving beacon, a shield in motion, drawing predators away from children too small to flee on their own. Rival human groups were as dangerous as any predator. Territory was contested silently, in the sweep of eyes, in the placement of camps, in the faint traces of footprints that marked borders. To migrate was to evade confrontation without bloodshed, to safeguard the young from both the hunger of beasts and the greed of men. Geological evidence confirms this instinct. Ancient tracks, fossilized along dried riverbeds and hardened mud plains, reveal bands of humans moving with coordination, carrying children, tools, and knowledge across vast distances. They were always vigilant, always calculating, always aware that one misstep could erase an entire generation. They moved not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Every mile walked was a mile stolen from death, a margin of safety for the youngest, most vulnerable among them. And yet, here you are, motionless in the comfort they never knew, hesitating to act in the only way you can. They walked endless miles to preserve life. You won't even take a step to subscribe? Think about that. In the harsh expanse of their world, survival was not an individual achievement, it was a collective endeavor. No child was left to fend for themselves. The smallest, weakest, or sickest among them were protected not only by parents but by the entire band. This is alloparenting. A practice older than memory, where adults who were not the child's own took on responsibility, teaching, shielding, and defending as though each infant were their own. Children learned early to obey the unspoken rules of survival. They were taught to remain silent when danger approached, to hide in the shadows, to move with the rhythm of the group. Every whispered instruction, every guiding hand, was a thread in a vast network of knowledge that preserved life. These lessons were not written. They were performed, repeated, and imprinted in the mind through the unforgiving crucible of experience. Emotional bonds were as critical as any tool or weapon. The infant's cry drew more than attention, it forged vigilance, loyalty, and protection. The mother, the alloparents, even the hunters returning from the plains, they were bound by an instinctive commitment to the young. These bonds were survival glue, stitching together the fragile, fleeting lives of a species in constant danger. Archaeology bears witness to this devotion. Burial sites show that even children who could not fend for themselves, disabled, injured, or ill, were cared for, sometimes for years, their survival ensured by the patience and sacrifice of others. These silent acts speak louder than any stone tool or sharpened spear. They reveal the extraordinary lengths humans went to protect life in a world that offered no guarantees. And still, you sit untouched by risk, untouched by necessity. They dedicated every ounce of attention, every beat of heart, every waking moment to preserve a single life. You won't even dedicate a moment to honor them with a simple click. That is cold. The echoes of those dark nights, the constant vigilance, the relentless watch over the young, they have not faded. They pulse through your veins even now. The instinct to guard, to anticipate danger, to cooperate in the protection of others, remains etched into the human mind and body. Our shoulders, our arms, our eyes, every adaptation honed for survival millions of years ago still shapes the way we move through the world. Tools and weapons have evolved, but the impulse to create, to manipulate our environment in defense of life, persists. Communities organize in emergencies, parents awaken at the slightest stir of a child, neighborhoods form collective responses to threats. Cooperation, once a necessity for survival against beasts and rival bands, is coded into our psychology, a constant reminder of what it took to reach this moment. Even in the quiet of modern life, far from saber-toothed teeth and creeping shadows, the instinct lingers. The memory of being hunted is written into our bones, guiding choices, vigilance, and the invisible rhythms of care. They did not endure for you to scroll past. They did not fight, watch, and risk everything for you to remain passive in comfort. Subscribe. Or at least explain in the comments why you won't. The darkness retreats, just slightly, revealing the outline of the mother who clutched her infant so long ago. She is still alive, still trembling, still holding the fragile heartbeat of the future against her chest. Not because she was stronger than the beasts or swifter than the hunters, but because she was never alone. Every eye that watched, every arm that protected, every mind that calculated risk and strategy, these were the walls that kept her safe. Survival was never about the strongest individual. It was about the strongest bonds. It was about cooperation, vigilance, and sacrifice. It was about understanding that the life of a child, the continuation of a lineage, mattered more than pride, comfort, or personal gain. From the fire that pushed back the shadows, to the sharpened stones that became extensions of intent, to the arms that could throw and defend across the darkened plains, every action was a declaration: we will endure. We will guard. We will live. And because they endured, because they guarded, because they survived against impossible odds, you are here to witness this story. If you're watching this, it means every ancestor before you succeeded in defending their young. At a cost you cannot imagine. The least you can do is honor their story. Subscribe to Tale of History, so their struggle isn't forgotten. And if you won't, tell us why in the comments, so others can remind you what they sacrificed for you to be here. We stand because they stood. We live because they survived. And the fire of their vigilance still burns within us all.